footprint.
Exactly, yes, and in Dubai, we believe.
Well, at least the hypocrisy. You can say what you like about them. They're
year.
all as hypocritical as each other, aren't they? Thank you very much indeed, Natasha Clark. Very nearly time for Shelagh Fogarty, but first, yada yada. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including Full Disclosure and James O'Brien Daily, the best bits of my show in 60 minutes every day. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Shelagh Fogarty.
Thank you very much, James. You will know by now that we are devoting all our programming today to online safety, or most of it anyway. The Online Safety Act aims to make social media firms and search engines protect children and adults in the UK from illegal, harmful material. But what will the Musks and the Zuckerbergs of this world actually do in response, if anything? Peter Kyle, the man whose job in government it is to ensure that technology works for our country and for you and your children, joins me shortly to take your calls, especially on safety, but you can ask him anything. If the tech bros don't ensure our children's safety, can the tech minister?
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 1 o'clock, a poll carried out for LBC has revealed 3/4 of parents would like to ban under 16s from using social media. The research by More in Common also found 83% say they fear online content harms their children's mental health. Ian Russell's daughter Molly took her own life aged 14 after viewing harmful content on social media. He's told LBC parents are losing trust in the government over the rollout of new protections.
I would say to Peter Kyle, do what you've promised the bereaved parents. Remember that every day you don't do this is a day when another tragedy might happen. It's not just that we've sat still and the harms that Molly saw are still there. That's true, but it's not just that. It's that there are new emerging harms.
Technology Secretary Peter Kyle will be taking your calls on LBC next. We've also been speaking to 16 and 17-year-old girls at the Weald School in West Sussex. They've told LBC they're concerned about the effect Andrew Tate and controversial influencers like him are having on young boys.
If I look at my brother's feed, like a couple of years ago when Andrew Tate was a massive thing, he would have loads of influencers like Andrew Tate and like others as well, all feeding the same kind of ideas.
The way that guys were like talking about girls in year 11 and year 10 was actually kind of horrifying, because it was like, you sound like a mini version of him and you're 15.
It's definitely, there's a very different sort of, I don't know, I think young girls are being shown something very different to young boys.
The platforms involved say they strictly prohibit harmful content and work to remove it. You can see more at lbc.co.uk/safety. Also this afternoon, an oil tanker has collided with a cargo ship off the coast of East Yorkshire in the North Sea. Lifeboats and a Coast Guard helicopter were called to the Humber estuary this morning. It's believed a US-flagged tanker is involved. The Home Secretary has rejected calls for a public inquiry into the murder of MP Sir David Amess in 2021. His attacker had been referred to the Prevent programme 7 years before the killing, but his case was closed. Yvette Cooper says it's difficult to see how an inquiry would unearth any new information. And people who live near new pylons will get hundreds of pounds off their annual energy bills. It's part of the government's plans to boost support for building infrastructure. In the city, a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading down 59 points at 86.20. The pound buys $1.29 and €1.19. LBC weather, a few spots of light rain and drizzle this afternoon. Sunny spells developing in northern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some rain for southern England, a high of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Shelagh Fogarty.
Hello there, good afternoon to you. You will know by now that we are devoting most of our time on air today to online safety, the online safety bill, the lives that you lead central to this, and the safety that is, I'm sure, paramount in your mind when it comes to your children in particular. And with that in mind, here's how I see it. You wouldn't send your child to a swimming pool that had no lifeguard. You wouldn't send your child to a restaurant that poisons people every day, to a friend's house with 10 strangers, let alone millions of strangers in it, to a school that taught them 1 + 1 = 7. But for hours and hours every week, that's precisely what happens, or is precisely what's available, at least, on social media and online more generally. Your children, and the rest of us, I suppose, can be targeted there by anyone, from Andrew Tate to the classmate that ends up stabbing them, to content that encourages them to kill themselves or starve themselves or hurt other people. So there is a reason, a very simple reason, why I'm going to devote the whole programme today to online safety, and that reason is your children. I'm joined by Peter Kyle, the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology and Labour MP for Hove and Portslade, who's here to take your calls. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me in.
I don't want to frighten you with that list, but that's a tiny bit of it, isn't it? You'll know, because it's your job to know.
It is.
That it is a huge responsibility that you have in your hands here, not just economically, of course. Tech is about economic growth as well. But on this issue of online safety, and especially children, you have, I would argue, one of the most important jobs in the country.
Thank you for recognising the importance of the job. That's why in the very first week I was appointed as Secretary of State back in July last year, I invited in victims of social media activity, mostly parents who had lost children to activity that happened online, into my office so I could start my time in this job listening to those people who've been negatively impacted. You did say, you listed a lot of analogies. I think an analogy that's put to me often is that seatbelts, why aren't we treating this like the seatbelt thing where we need to keep people safe from the outset?
It's a lot more complicated, isn't it, than seatbelts?
Well, yeah, exactly, because there is no safe way of being in a car without wearing a seatbelt. And the thing about social media is there is a lot of positive stuff as well. The challenge we have to do moving forward is how we can embrace the positive, learning, developmental work, being in touch with good people, not just people who seek to do harm. All of these things are really important. Parents staying in touch throughout the day with their kids and all these sorts of things. How we can embrace that and focus on that and develop that whilst mitigating the harms that are there. So it's a lot more sophisticated, but I'm determined to do it.
And just before we get to our first call, which is from Ben in Cambridge, just so people know what the Online Safety Act aims to do, and it comes into force this year, doesn't it? What it aims to do, very quickly, aims to it will require platforms to show they're committed to removing illegal content, which includes child sexual abuse, controlling coercive behaviour, extreme sexual violence, promoting, facilitating suicide or self-harm, animal cruelty, selling illegal drugs or weapons, terrorism, and on it goes. We're failing on all of those at the moment, aren't we?
Well, this is the thing that's so frustrating for me, is that a lot of the things you've just said aren't actually on statute and being implemented yet. So it won't be until July this year that age-appropriate content has to be implemented. It's only next week that illegal content must be removed by law from these platforms. So, it's taken 7 years to get this legislation through the House and being implemented. That is unacceptable. And I hope that as we go on through this conversation, people also understand my own frustration, because I've come into power. I've come into this job when the Act has not even been fully implemented. I don't have all of the powers, and I'm explaining to people why in the last 6-7 months that I've been in this job, I've not been able to do all the things I want to do, because the powers aren't going to come in until the coming months, and I'm already thinking about what we do next. But that's why I'm so keen to hear from some of your listeners about their lived experiences, so that I can bring those in and reassure people about the direction of travel that we are taking.
And the number to call, as ever, 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. You can send a WhatsApp message on that long number as well. Ben has called from Cambridge. Hi, Ben.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mr. Carl.
Hi, Ben.
Families like mine across the country are pleading for the government to help us to protect our children from exploitation by the tech industry, and yet it feels that you keep saying that we need more research and evidence before the government can take more action, which feels hopelessly out of touch with what parents and teachers are seeing every day. So my question is, why is the government prioritising big tech and economic growth at the expense of the safety and well-being of our children?
Thanks, Ben. I know that the views that you're saying are quite widely felt. Firstly, let me reassure you that the size of the tech company has no bearing on the way I approach this issue. The first point, the starting point, is always what will keep people safe, but also what will deliver the safety. We do live in a different age where the issues that we're talking about aren't just generated from within Britain and within our territory. They are most often being generated from a foreign territory, an overseas territory. And therefore, it's not always possible just for me to sit in Whitehall and legislate and regulate to get the companies to do what we need to do. So it also requires a degree of statecraft, relationship building, and also informing. The other thing that's led to the situation that we're in now, which I think profoundly frustrates me, is that when these companies started releasing products into society, we were so exhilarated with the products that the way we were connected with people that we hadn't been in touch with for ages, we only saw the upsides. By the time some of the challenges and the negatives started creeping in, then there was no regulation in place. So we're always regulating sort of backwards and retrospectively. What I'm trying to do is to get the genie back in the bottle, if you like, so that safety is baked in from the outside. There is nothing probably in your home or on the table I'm sitting here in Sheila's studio that hasn't got some kind of kite mark to prove it's safe to be deployed in our economy. But that's not true with online life. And I've inherited a situation coming into the office just 7 months ago where it's okay on the online world to release products and deal with safety afterwards. But Ben, I promise you, on intimate image abuse, I've introduced, I've used some creatively the powers I have so that algorithms have to stop intimate images of people illegally making it online. If they're not, they can be fined 10% of global earnings. When it comes to children...
Can be or will be.
Will be. Yes, so that comes on into power. You know, I brought this into power. I've listened to victims themselves, and I've issued for the first time as Secretary of State a statement of strategic priorities, which is a letter that goes to Ofcom demanding that they use their powers to the maximum in order to prioritise the safety of children and other vulnerable groups. So I've used very creatively these groups, and now when we start seeing things like deepfakes, I have pledged that I will legislate to make sure that deepfakes aren't used to harm people. So I am already using additional powers to keep people safe, and that's in the face of sometimes challenging technology companies, large and small. I'll continue to do it, but once the implementation phase of the Online Safety Act has gone through, I've already pledged that I will legislate again to make sure that legislation is up to date for the moment we're living in.
Can I ask you to keep in mind, I'm going to play you a clip from Nick Ferrari's programme this morning, and when I do, can you keep in mind what you said just a moment ago about only really having full powers as legislation allows you so far come July? Take a listen to this. Nick Ferrari spoke to Ian Russell, who I know you'll know, founder of the Molly Rose Foundation and father of Molly Rose Russell, who took her own life in 2017, aged 14, after viewing suicide and self-harm content on Instagram. Here's what he said.
I'm losing trust with Peter Kyle, and I know all the bereaved parents that I've connected with are losing trust, some more than me. He was very quick to meet the bereaved families. Within the first week of forming a government, we were in his office talking to him. It all sounded really hopeful. We're now months into government, and we're hearing things in the papers where it doesn't sound like he's even considering a strengthened Online Safety Act 2, which we all agree is needed. I would say to Peter Kyle, do what you've promised the bereaved parents. Remember that every day you don't do this is a day when another tragedy might happen. We see these harms are getting worse, not better, and yet the government is buying time, courting the big tech companies and seeming to fail to act on safety online.
So Ian is someone I have unimaginable amounts of respect for. I've met him numerous times, and in fact, most recently with the Prime Minister himself, so that we could listen to Ian and his story and the story of Molly. The reality is that I've inherited a landscape where the law has not yet been implemented and finalised. In that time, I've used all the powers I can to start making progress.
You've said that already. From July, can you satisfy Ian Russell?
I have already said publicly, and to Ian and to victims, I am going to legislate. And I am also working very hard to figure out what that legislation will look like. Now, when Ian and others say Online Safety Act 2, I just have to be very direct back to him. It took 7 years to get the Online Safety Act onto statute.
Technology moves quickly.
So I am not going to make a
slowly.
promise.
Yeah.
I'm going to repeat what has already been done. I'm going to do it swifter. I'm going to do it more effective. I'm going to do it better and smarter. That's what I'm working at. It might well be that I have to get Parliament used to having more regular updates of social media activity and legislation. So that means maybe 2 or 3 times in a parliament rather than once every 2 or 3 parliaments. But I'm trying to figure out how we can have a legislation and a regulatory environment that keeps pace with the change that we have. So I've not pledged to do Online Safety Act 2 because I think that would be a betrayal of those people who are demanding swift action. Because
You're thinking more in terms of beyond July anyway. You're thinking
Indeed.
more in terms of piecemeal important pieces of legislation, as you might describe
Indeed.
it.
Now, look, if we have just one piece of legislation, it will take a long time to get it through, a long time to conceive. But there are things we know that are going to be quite pressing, and there are things we're going to be learning. I need to learn from how these new powers that are coming in between now and the summer, including making sure that content is age appropriate by law. No, I need to see how effective they are. If they're effective, then great, we can move on to other things. If they're not effective, then I'm going to have to tighten it up. Okay. And I want to do so swiftly. I can't wait another 7 years to get cracking with this stuff.
Let me get Zach from Norwich on for you. Hello, Zach. Your question to Peter.
Hello. Hi, Mr. Carl. Just a question sort of for myself. Obviously, I'm 18 years old. I'm at college, obviously around a lot of young people the same age as me. Quite a broad thing to be seen sort of in this generation that I'm in is sort of the deep-rooted or starting to become deep-rooted misogynistic language that's being sort of perpetuated sort of in circles such as education. And I wondered, obviously, in combination with the online legislation that you are setting to, put on the statute book, what sort of broader societal shift we could potentially in terms of, from an early age, trying to reduce misogyny.
Thanks, Zach. And it's really great the fact that you have acknowledged this and the impact it has on you and your friends. You are a generation that has been let down by this because the law simply hasn't been on your side. So when it comes to violent misogyny, from next week, that is going to be illegal and online platforms must remove it from their platforms. When it comes to other areas of debate, then we have to make the regulators and the law enforcement agencies are going to have to make judgments about what is appropriate and not appropriate. But there will be powers to act. By the summer, in July, there will be additional powers that means things have to be age appropriate. So it means that where there are issues that are being debated, which includes things about relationships and so forth, then it must be age appropriate, and that includes misogynistic behaviour, which could be inappropriate for some people's age, but actually for adults, that is uncomfortable, but needs to be part of free speech. So there are additional measures coming in. This is something that I don't want to sound flippant in, and that it's going to be tackled because we have a huge issue on this. Our government's aim, and I'm part of the group which is chaired by the Home Secretary, is to halve violence against women and girls. And I'm part of that group, and I'm determined that the online environment becomes a place which is nourishing and healthy for people to learn and develop, but also where there is debate around these issues, that it's done in a way that is constructive and not harmful.
You said there at the beginning of your answer to Zach that the companies must remove it, this misogynistic content. There's a hell of a lot of it out there. Have they told you that they will, and how they will remove it?
That's right. So when it comes to violent misogyny, that is illegal content, and that must be removed. And they must use algorithms, technology.
But do they, and will they?
They will do, and they've had a lot of notice. This is part of the issue about why it's taken so long to get these powers to be enacted, and why Ofcom. And I know that you were speaking to Melody Dawes from Ofcom earlier today on LBC, but. These powers that we've been engaging with the tech companies an awful lot. These powers are not being used anywhere else in the world. So when people say, that we're dragging our heels, actually we are some of the most assertive regulators and legislators in the world. We know that there are a lot of issues, and I have to see how the impact that this has before I start making judgments on where we go forward. But misogyny is something which is really, really deeply worrying to me. There is some of it which is clearly criminal and should never, ever have gone online in the first place. Companies will be required to use algorithms to prevent that material going on in the first place. If it does make it online, they must remove it as early as practical. And if not, they will face heavy fines and sanctions from the British regulators.
As you say this, I have people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg in mind. Have you met either of them or both of them?
I've not met either of those, but we are in constant touch with the companies themselves. And look,
the people you meet, are they going to do it?
So, well, they will have to if they want to continue operating in this country.
Well, they could turn their back on Britain.
They could. Indeed, they could. And that is a choice that has to be made. Now, I have had the privilege of going to California a number of times in this job and meeting very senior people in businesses such as the ones we're talking about. And I have said to them that I think and I want to create the best place to invest and deploy technology in the world. However, and I say this verbatim, that access to the British society and the British economy is a privilege, it is not a right. And we, on behalf of Britain, as a government, have expectations of how you act when you are delivering products into our country.
Do they care when you say that?
So this is the expectations that I set. As I said to you before, they are at the moment able to release products and deal with safety afterwards. When it comes to intimate image abuse, which I used those powers earlier, they now have to use algorithms to prevent that stuff going online in the first place. That is increasingly going to be the expectation that I have. We need to make sure that products keep people safe before they are deployed into our society. This is a fundamental change from how technology companies are deploying products at the moment. We have to move towards it, and with me, we will move towards it. And the next stage is going to be dealing with deep fakes.
And we know already that some of the online companies, the big ones, have done their own research into how social media can damage children's mental health. Again, they're sitting on that research. They're not sharing it. And obviously lots of other people are doing similar research, but it'd be great to have their data, but they're not sharing it for some reason. Have a listen to this. Ellen Room, mother of 14-year-old Jules. She said she's been trying to obtain data from TikTok that she thinks could provide clarity on his death. She's campaigning for legislation to grant parents access to their child's social media accounts if they die. I'm sure you've spoken to parents who are doing the same. She spoke to James O'Brien earlier.
They have the legal right at the age of 13 to their data themselves, which as a parent, you're responsible for that child still. And I want to know what he was watching and who is messaging him and what he's seen. And as a parent, you have no legal rights, which is where I've been campaigning for my Jules Law campaign, that parents should have the right to that.
Ellen is outstanding. And again, I've met Ellen, I've listened to her story and been so deeply moved by it, believe me. So what we've done is we've changed the law already so that coroners will have the power to request all data from social media companies in the event of a child's death. Now, previously, tech companies could delete the data as soon as a child died. That is now unlawful. So they are keeping the data, and coroners can request that data. And of course, it is now going to be obviously part of any investigation a coroner does to routinely request that data and make it available as part of the coroner's the coronial process. There are lots of reasons why I don't think that parents should just be able to do directly release that sort of material, because we're talking about the death and there needs to be an inquiry into the death, and there's no other part of the criminal justice where there's no other part of a criminal investigation where a victim can directly compel information in those circumstances, which I know is really hard for Ellen to hear. And we've spoken about this directly. But also the challenge is that the previous government didn't tackle this issue. So Ellen was caught in this period where the law wasn't on her side and the data has almost certainly been lost. I can't even imagine how painful that is. But nobody going forward will be in that position.
I understand what you say about the justice system requiring systems in order to be fair to everybody. And yet you've got standout examples in our country where, I think of Hillsborough, for example, where the papers on Hillsborough were only released when they were released because of public pressure, very loud public pressure. And in a sense, that's all Ellen is doing. And those other parents, they're pressuring government to do it sooner and better.
That's right. And I have every sympathy for it. And I want to do it in a way that puts the interests of the child first. Sheila, these are very difficult issues. And, there are some children, and it is not in this case, there are some children for whom the parents are the problem. And we need to make sure, there are some children who are being abused by parents. So to give a carte blanche right for parents to always have the right to access their child's data is not in the interests of every child, even though it might be in many children. So you get a glimpse into why these issues are so very difficult when we come to changing the law and putting the interests of every child first. So I think in this circumstance, giving the additional powers to the coroners, but of course, this is dealing with death. We've got to make sure that the system and the laws are preventing people from dying in the first place. So we are taking action on getting suicide material off of the internet and out of the hands of children. We're doing everything we can do to tackle the peer pressure that children are being put under. The misogyny and the criminal misogyny that is out there, we're taking steps to deal with. Deepfakes, I will be legislating for. Okay. And I'm keeping an open mind about what we do about handsets and online activity into the future based on evidence that I am already commissioning, because as you said, the tech companies aren't providing us with it.
And very briefly, because I'd like to get to more calls, really briefly if you would, do you have any concerns about people who put their own children on social media in all kinds of different ways? And I don't just mean a trip out with mum and dad with their faces eclipsed. I mean almost using them as influencers online. Is that something that concerns you?
For me, that is part of the family. And I think parents need to make those choices based on their decisions for their family. And I don't want to give one rule for everyone.
Content.
Precisely.
OK, thank you. Oliver's called from St Albans. Hello, Oliver.
Oh, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Secretary of State.
Hi,
given the Silicon Valley has successfully enlisted the US government in pursuit of its commercial aims, how will you resist efforts to defang the Online Safety Act as part of tariff negotiations?
Thanks, Oliver. I know that people are concerned about this, and let me just reassure you that our online safety standards are not up for negotiation. They are on statute and they will remain. They will adapt over time because they have to, because the online world is adapting. But the standards that we have set, the measures that we have in statute, and the things that I've been talking about in the ways that we are going to be keeping people safe into the future, they're not up for negotiation, I can assure you.
You satisfied with that, Oliver?
Well, I'm worried that the reality of the most powerful and quite largely unregulated companies in the world, when they come to looking towards their own interests and saying, well, we don't like the look of the Online Safety Act, we don't like the look of the Digital Services Act in the EU. I just worry about the reality of what we're going to do when we're so desperately seeking their investment and looking to tech platforms and AI even for growth. So I'm worried about the reality of those situations.
Oliver, I think you're right to be worried, because these are areas which has become thrust into public debate and also politicised. So I understand that. I've given you the reassurance, but also look more fully about some of the things that are being said. If you take Elon Musk, for example, he said some pretty strident things about regulation, but one thing he's been pretty consistent at is about keeping children safe online. He's been very, very outspoken about child safety. If you look at Mark Zuckerberg, there was a lot of attention about the statement he made before the inauguration back in January. But actually that statement that talked about free speech also said, and I quote pretty much verbatim, that we need to do better at taking illegal content down and keeping children safe. So there is a lot more nuance in there, even from those people who are leading these big tech companies when it comes to child safety. And the conversations I have privately within the companies, I hope that people, if they were able to see and be witness to the conversations that I have, would see that the voice of victims is represented, as well as the need to make sure that Britain benefits from technology going forward to get this balancing act right. But also, I'm very often able to talk to people in tech companies who are parents themselves. So it's not just a detached conversation that is impersonal. These are conversations that actually that most people want to get right, even though that we are talking about very heavily contested issues.
But as you said, some parents are the problem. And Mark Zuckerberg himself said he wouldn't have his children on social media till they're 16, was it? I think it was. And yet he's not doing enough about other people's children. Let's thank you, Oliver. Katie in Northampton. Hi, Katie.
Hi there, good afternoon. The government has commissioned Cambridge University to study the impact of harm from smartphones and social media. The need for such research alone raises serious concerns about their safety. And with this in mind, shouldn't we immediately be adopting a precautionary approach in our school policies, considering primary schools and secondary schools and what is allowed for those age brackets?
Katie, thanks so much for mentioning this, because it's a frustration. I can never usually mention this. It is a huge frustration for me that I have come into office and there is an entire lack of evidence for which I can make policies and change the law. And if I'm going to change the law, and a lot of people are requesting that I ban things, whether it be apps or whether it be handsets or other things, if I'm going to do something which would affect every single person of a certain age in our country, I want to make sure we're doing it based on evidence. It is a frustration
watching Australia
of mine.
Closely, presumably.
I am watching Australia closely. I'm watching other countries'
Today's
experiences.
show gives you lots of evidence.
Well, no, so
whenever we talk about this, there's lots of evidence.
There is an enormous amount of anecdotal evidence, and we've already spoken about Ian and Ellen and other victims who I've met personally and I listened to. But let me just to tell you why I have already commissioned comprehensive, long-term, peer-reviewed evidence into this, because we know that overall children are being negatively impacted. What we don't know is which products, whether it's the smartphones and the amount of time they spend online, whether it is individual products, and also have that linked to children from different backgrounds, different areas, different cultures. So we don't know precisely what the granular interaction between products, handsets and online activity is having in different circumstances. So I want to make sure that we are getting the law right as broadly as I can, and I'm commissioning evidence in the face of frustration that the tech companies who are making a lot of money out of these products aren't commissioning the research they would. If I was running one of these companies and making the money they are, I would be pretty curious as to the impact that my products were having on society and on children. They don't seem to be, so I am stepping up on behalf of the government and the country to get that evidence. And I am very open-minded about what I do going forward, but it must be understanding at a granular detail, because I don't want to ban something that also has the potential to benefit. We need to focus, and when I speak to kids as well, and I've gone to the NSPCC and I've done focus groups with children, not one of the children I've met wants to have it removed from them, but all of them want to feel safer online and be safer online, and that's what I'm trying to achieve.
It's interesting you say that. You won't be here to hear it, but at 2:00 I'm going to speak to the journalist Decca Aitkenhead. I don't know whether you remember the piece she wrote in the Times a while back, not that long ago, when she took her phone, her son's phone, and his friends went out without their smartphones. And several of them said to her at the end of the process, we wish these things had never been invented. So I think kids are asking for more help than we might imagine on this, I think. And on the question of age limits, given that was part of Katie's question, Keir Starmer, and I presume it's, therefore government policy on this or cabinet agreement on this, his sense of 16 banning smartphones from schools from 16 down, and you say you're keeping an eye on Australia. What is the reason why? Is it your point of not wanting to just have an impact on a huge number of people without proper evidence? There's an awful lot of evidence that these are, from teachers in particular, that these are distracting, that they are affecting children's mental health. What is it that Keir Starmer is so attached to, the use of a phone or the presence of a phone in a school?
Well, 97% of schools at the moment regulate and don't allow and find their own unique ways of keeping smartphones out of classrooms, and that's appropriate. Every community is different. So we need to make sure that schools use technology in a way that is appropriate for their own community, their own school community, and the way that they run their schools. And I think that is appropriate. But there's lots of reasons why some kids, some children might need to have smartphones around them. So we are, but I accept that there should, on the whole, be no place for phones in schools.
But they're used as a teaching tool. They're used for kids to do their homework.
And in some cases they are, and they should be, because phones are going to be part of people's lives for the rest of their lives. You can't have this situation where, if we're being educated and prepared for life in the modern economy, that you exclude the thing that the technology that actually is driving a lot of the technology technology you're going to be using in the workplace going forward. So these are very complicated issues. We're trying to weigh...
Using mine as we speak.
Sheila's waving her phone at me as we speak.
Yeah. That's the dilemma, though, isn't it? Because they are incredibly useful. They're useful for keeping connected. There could, of course, be exemptions if a child has an illness and needs to be alerted or whatever, or be reminded to take a medication, all kinds of reasons. And the fact that it is, as you say, it's as important as a pen was maybe when I went to school. But there is so much. There's no danger in a pen other than if you stick it in your own eye. But you know what I mean? There's so many dangers here.
There is.
There are such tough choices to make.
There is. And don't get me wrong. I don't think there's a place in the classroom for phones unless there is a specific educative purpose for having it there. And that's what we have to get the balance right for, which is why I think schools need to have the flexibility to make sure that kids can benefit from the developmental and the learning opportunities that are in modern technology, but they're not disproportionately impacted by the harms. And that's the overall challenge that I have as Secretary of State as we adapt the law and the regulation and enter into what is pretty much negotiations and discussions with these companies as we go forward.
You said it's complicated, and you are quite right. The whole terrain is incredibly complicated. That's the answer to the question on phones in the classroom for now, anyway. What about if you could magically decide the age at which a child can have access to social media? When would it be? Shall I tell you what I think, first of all, and then you can tell me what you think?
Go on then, because
I actually say 18.
Really?
What do you social media?
I'd love to know why you think 18.
Because the harms it's doing is so atrocious.
Okay, well, look, from July, all people creating content and distributing content as platforms will have to make sure it is age appropriate what they're seeing. It is appalling that kids as young as 12 and younger can have access to everything. I mean, that's not appropriate, and that will change this year. And I'm looking very carefully
That's neglect by the parent, isn't it?
Well, I think there is a lot of blame to go around, and also a lot of parents just don't have the sort of digital literacy to understand how to use what's already out there. I mean, most parents, we grew up as children having physical boundaries set by parents. And then for when you become parents yourselves, you're very used to how parents set those physical boundaries about curfews and about food and about the people you socialise with and all this sort of stuff. But now we've entered this digital age, and most parents are thrown into it over a period of a few years, and they don't have the digital skills inherited from previous generations.
I would be at sea.
So I have
if I were doing it, I would be at sea.
real sympathy, and most don't actually understand how to set the parental boundaries you have on that are already accessible. And I know Apple are trying to do some more work on this, which should be praised. But these are all the issues that we're doing because of the swiftness with which this technology has landed in society.
Just finally, because I know you have to go, is there much work or any work being done on that? At helping parents. There is.
There's lots of work we're trying to do on it. And you asked me about what age, if I could magically do it. If I could magically do it, then it would be different for every child, because I think every child develops at different levels and comes from different backgrounds with different challenges and different opportunities that they have before them, different talents. I would want to make sure that everyone, but that's not the world we're living in.
No.
But we do have opportunities going forward, and I'm looking very carefully about how government can play a much more constructive role in how we ensure that children of the right age are looking at the right material. I don't want all of this just to be the responsibility of others. I want to see if we have the power as government that we can. So I can't wait to come back and speak to you in the coming months when I have a bit more freedom from the laws that are currently we're waiting to have the powers for, so I can speak a bit more expansively about where I will be taking things into the future.
And you are confident, are you, that trading with Donald Trump and the tech bros in America will not harm our children? You won't stand for anything that continues to harm our children? So
technology is moving forward fast. We don't know yet the full impact that AI is going to have on social media and how it's going to interact with different parts of life. The relationship we're trying to build with America is look at areas where we have joint endeavour, where we could partner to benefit both American citizens and the economy and British citizens and our economy. That is what Keir Starmer has prioritised. That will be over areas like AI, quantum technology, space, all of these areas where we have real expertise and we can help America. Because look, I need to be really clear about this. There are other countries out there who will use this technology to harm our country. These are economic opportunities, they are societal opportunities, but they also have national security implications. It is incredibly important that countries like Britain don't just win the race, but we stay ahead of the race with this technology. And by partnering with countries like America, we can ensure that democratic countries with democratic values can succeed in this world. And I will strive to make sure that people are kept safe as this world evolves so fast.
Well, thank you for giving us so much of your time. I hope you come back, take more calls. Thank you, Peter Carr, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology and Labour MP for Hove and Port Slade. I'll reflect on everything that Peter has said to your calls and the questions you were asking as well with our political editor, Natasha Clark, in just a few moments. Your calls, as ever, on 0345 6060 973. Amelia Cox has a news update.
The Technology Secretary has told LBC social media companies have a privilege, not a right, to access the British public. Peter Carr says new safeguards due to be introduced in the Online Safety Act are not up for negotiation. 32